Good afternoon from Basis, and welcome to the seventh in our series of Wednesday webinars entitled More Than a Game. Great to see so many of you in the room with some familiar faces here. Nice to see you. I'm Chris Whitaker, chair of the steering group at Basis, and this week we have three special guests to help us to discuss one of the pillars of the model of sustainability, and that is social sustainability. I'd like to quote from a paper on social sustainability by Kristen Majors from Portland University. Community resilience could be defined as the existence, development, and engagement of community resources by community members to thrive in an environment characterized by change, uncertainty, unpredictability, and surprise. Well, I think we can all identify with that in the current circumstances of the pandemic and the desire for change that the Black Lives Matter movement is striving for. This emphasizes that social sustainability is a wide-ranging, multi-dimensional concept, which is hard to define. Where does sport fit into this? Well, we believe sport plays an important role within that model, and recreational and professional sport will play a part in helping build back community cohesion and togetherness to address the challenge of isolation and effect on mental health that lockdown in particular has aggravated. In a minute to discuss this, I will hand over to Matt Kabir Floyd to introduce himself and our guests. Matt.
I'll be asking the questions, but more importantly, we've got a couple of well-known faces from the world of sport who will be answering them. Let me introduce them both to you then. First of all, we have Clare Conner, who had a very distinguished career as a cricket player for England. She was the captain of the side for many years, many games, and she played over 100 internationals across the formats in all. And since then has had a very successful career as an administrator. She's had various senior roles at the ECB and other places, and she's currently the managing director of women's cricket for the ECB. So a very big job you've got, Clare, in particular during these trying times. How are you? Are you healthy and fit?
Yeah, I am. Fortuitously, I am. I'm really healthy and yeah, coping okay, thank you.
All right, well, good to hear. We'll get back to you in a second. Let me introduce our second special guest as well. One of the top badminton players in Great Britain at the moment, that is Lauren Smith. She plays mainly mixed and women's doubles, has won numerous medals, both at the European and Commonwealth Games over the last few years, including, I think, a gold last year in the mixed doubles of the European Championships in Minsk. She's also played in the Olympics, the 2016 Rio Olympics. Lauren, how are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. As well as can be, and actually back on a badminton court this week. So yeah, very good.
Right. I was going to ask you that actually. So this will be your first time playing, will it, this week?
Yeah, first time I've actually been on a proper court since March, so since lockdown began, which is very nice because badminton outdoors doesn't really work, unfortunately.
You know, I know that's the case because I actually bought myself a couple of badminton rackets and I've been trying to play in my garden, but the shuttlecocks go all over the place.
Yeah, you need us still there.
Yeah, loads of people have been doing the same thing, I'm sure, over the last few weeks anyway. Right, there's loads for us to talk about. We'll get onto Black Lives Matter, of course, in due course, also women in sport and equality. But let's obviously start with COVID, because that is the overriding issue at the moment. Clare, as an administrator, was COVID-19 and the impact of it just something that was impossible to prepare for, really?
Oh yeah, I'm sure the same is true for every sector. Yeah, it hit us. I suppose everyone saw it kind of coming, didn't we, over those weeks during February, as we read the news around the world, or as we read the news particularly from Wuhan, and we saw those scenes. Did we think it would arrive on our shores? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know. I remember reading the papers during February and you know, seeing those scenes and thinking, God, that looks like the set from a movie. But no, to answer your question, you know, it's the most kind of most unprecedented, surprising, remarkable situation that, you know, cricket, you know, I can only speak for cricket, that, you know, we faced in modern times. And obviously it's the most significant, it'll be the most significant health and economic crisis of the last century at least. So you can't tell you don't know what's going to happen. You don't, even every day now, you are still being surprised by things that you're kind of yet to consider and you didn't think, you hadn't thought about. And I remember those sort of early weeks, you know, it was very kind of urgent and adrenaline charged, you know, when we shut the office at Lord's, we would, you know, I remember we were due to have a leadership team meeting, I think on the Thursday just before the Monday, the 23rd, when Boris made that first announcement. And, you know, that Thursday meeting was cancelled, that we shut the office. I think the same day the schools closures were announced, and it all felt suddenly urgent and I guess quite frightening for everybody. And yeah, and it's been kind of, you know, to see the scenes around the world and in our own countries being, you know, desperately sad and tragic. And I think you realise, in what I've realised, that sport is, you know, sport is only sport, but it really does matter to people. I've realised those two things concurrently. I think that it is for me just a job. It's my passion as well as my job, but it is just sport on the one hand, but it is so much more than I don't know, you know, it matters so much to people, and people's support and the unity, particularly that cricket has shown over the last few months, has been staggering. But yeah, urgent, kind of adrenaline charged first few weeks, responding to things and realizing the gravity of the situation and what it meant for potentially the next few weeks, the next few months, potentially the whole cricket season, and then trying to rationalize all that. What does that mean? What does that mean for international cricket? What does it mean for colleagues? What does it mean for colleagues who will go on to the furlough scheme? What does it mean for the recreational game, for schools, for the plans that we had to invest £20 million over the next 2 years into the women's and girls game? You know, all of that, I remember it being really kind of really urgent, and to, you know, I feel slightly bad saying it, but exciting, because you're responding, you know, having to react in the best way you can, aren't you, to questions that you've never been asked before. So in terms of, I suppose, a leadership challenge, it was exciting in those early weeks. I don't think it's quite so exciting now. But I'll stop there, Matt, because obviously there's loads to talk about. But yeah, huge shock, hugely unprecedented. But I feel very privileged to work in cricket and in sport, where I've realised through this that sport really matters to people, and that sport hopefully will really help the recovery.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that actually, because you mentioned there that I've realised it's only sport, and yet how important it is to society. And I'd agree with that. I think people have seen the power of sport over the last few weeks and how important it is to people's lives. So, you know, what have the ECB in this cricket board been doing to keep the cricket community going? You know, specifically the fans and those that play recreational cricket who haven't been able to play or watch cricket over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think we've done quite a bit financially. So we've offered lots of emergency loans to clubs and counties, a recreational loan package of over £20 million about a month ago into the recreational game, and a much bigger number into kind of keeping the lights on in our professional county structures. I think one of the things I've been the most, probably for me, joyful and inspiring thing I've been involved in was our chief executive asked me to lead a piece of work to look at what cricket could contribute during this period where it can't give people its normal offering. It can't be played, and it can't bring people together in the normal way in cricket clubs or in communities, in the nets, wherever it may be played and where it conventionally brings people together. And we launched a couple of weeks ago a campaign called Together Through This Test, which has just been a remarkable thing to be involved in. We've had 3 strands of that kind of this sort of campaign working now for 8 weeks, revolving around connecting communities, physical and mental health and well-being, and children and young people, and the whole education effort and the homeschooling effort for families. And we'll be involved in the next few weeks in some of the BBC bite-sized daily stuff. And we launched a couple of weeks ago the actual campaign called Together Through This Test, with a short film narrated by Stephen Fry. And we've really acted as the kind of the umbrella, coordinating and sort of collating everything together as the national governing body, something, we've never had to do before. But the response from the cricket community has just been incredible. We've had over 300 initiatives up and running in recreational clubs or via recreational clubs and communities, and the professional game. The 18 first-class counties have come together and organised a big online auction that's raised over £25,000 in a fortnight. In total, the kind of cumulative fundraising effort through that campaign's just gone over £200,000. And I think it's been a really lovely response from the game that you will see continue actually when England men play the West Indies next month, through a kind of a mini campaign within it called #RaiseTheBat, which is a campaign we launched last week, where England men's and women's and disability players have taken photos in their back gardens or whatever in their England kit, raising their bat to nominated key workers from the cricket community. Wow. And hopefully that'll be a way that cricket says thank you to the people in our game who have, in whatever roles, who've played their part and kind of taken off their cricket pads or cricket kit and gone and put on PPE equipment or whatever they've done. So yeah, I think I've been really proud of that, the response from cricket and the response from the game as a collective. And I think it's kind of shown us what sport can do. It's shown us how people want to help and support their communities, in whatever way they can.
Yeah, well, let's get Lauren's point of view on this then as well, Lauren. I mean, you obviously in quite a difficult situation yourself, because you're preparing for an upcoming Olympics, which got postponed pretty late in the day. So quite a difficult situation for you personally. Do you think that there can be some good, though, that can come from this pandemic in terms of sports' relationship to society?
Yeah, definitely. I think, Claire made a really good point that it's about viewing this situation as of what good can we take from it? What can we do better now, and how can sport contribute to helping people get through this? Because if you look at the homeschooling situations, and I've got a brother who's 11 years old, so I'm kind of aware of how much I want to throttle him, trying to get him to do work at home. But like that sort of stuff he's at home and he's stuck and he's hyperactive, and it's how can sports get involved and say, this is something you can do at home to help with your homeschooling. And the Joe Wicks PE movement has really taken off, and it is evident that sport plays a huge role in our society, from how much people have kind of missed it through this period, and how much people have turned to it for their kind of have endorphins almost. It's been a hard time, we've been stuck at home, and yet the majority of the population are really eager to get outside and exercise and then get involved with sport where they can. The difficult thing is there's a lot of sports that you can't do on your own, and there's a lot of sports that you can't do socially distanced. So it's finding out ways to be more inventive with what you're doing, what activity you're doing, and being inspired by hopefully things like badminton players on social media and things like that to push your kids to get involved. But as far as the Olympics is concerned, it was obviously quite a disappointment for it to be postponed, but at the end of the day, it was postponed and not cancelled. And I think the Olympics behind closed doors without a crowd wouldn't be the Olympics, really, because as much as for me, it's about going and performing and, you know, succeeding where I can. In my mind, the Olympics is the pinnacle of sport bringing people together. And there's no better time than when the Olympics is on. And actually, when I was in Rio, the strangest thing for me was not being in England and watching and sharing that experience of watching our athletes with other people. It was almost the least I'd ever watched the Olympics, which was really good because I was there. But, you know, with everything going on at the moment, it was definitely the right decision. But just a frustration from the side of a lot of athletes. And with the qualification process for badminton, there was probably about 10 tournaments that were cancelled, and those 10 tournaments would have been the last of the qualifying procedure. And what they've done is they've moved them tournaments. So qualifying was supposed to finish at the end of April, and it's now going to finish the end of next April. So it's kind of really prolonged a very mentally difficult sort of period for badminton players. But like I say, if it means that we get to have the crowds in and you know, hopefully bring everyone together after a really difficult time.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there could be a real sense of anticipation for the Olympics next year because they've had this extra year building up. And hopefully you won't see much of it next year as well because you'll be out there competing in Tokyo. Carry on your form, you certainly will be. Just going back to the points we made there about sport within society, we're talking about the sustainability of sport here. Do you think the big selling points on that front is that sport actually now is being seen as vital for your mental health as it is for your physical health?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's no longer something that people are viewing as you have to be a type of person to do, or as much of a luxury. It's something that people are wanting to do to get out of their house and to kind of have that headspace. And it's definitely one of those times where you want to tie in things like sustainability to the fact that it is so good for your mental health, because, you know, you can kind of package it all together as one great thing, because sometimes when you speak about sustainability, unfortunately, people don't really want to listen. But if you're speaking about mental health and sustainability alongside, or if you're speaking about good business and finance and sustainability alongside, people are going to listen because it is a really important conversation. And I believe people should listen when you say sustainability, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. So it's, you know, it's important for things like this to happen so that we can kind of come up with how we're going to tie those together and get it into the forefront of people's minds. Because, you know, sustainability sometimes has I don't know, it's viewed as a very sort of type of person issue, whereas actually it's not a type of person issue, it's an everyone issue. And as soon as you tie that into a sport, which is something that people are really passionate about and people that really love, and you say, look, if we don't make these changes, this won't be available to you forever. And so, you know, for example, during Corona, did you miss it? Well, yeah, I missed it. So you know that if it's not here, you're going to want it. So then people might go, well, actually, you know, it's worth putting this effort in to make that change.
Okay, let's move on and talk about gender equality here, and because COVID-19 has had a bit of an impact on women's sport, hasn't it? We come to you, Claire. In cricket terms, it seems as though the women are sort of behind the men in terms of the priority of getting live cricket on, which I suppose is quite understandable because a lot of the money comes from the men's game and the broadcast deal. So the priority at the moment seems to be on Test cricket, men's Test cricket, and then the women are due to have, I think, India and South Africa touring this year. So obviously, hopefully, those games can go ahead as well. But at this point, we just don't know. There's no real guarantee. So you're someone who's obviously championed women's cricket strongly throughout your playing and administration career. I mean, how concerning is it for you that there might not be any women's cricket this summer, particularly at this time when women's cricket is on a massive high? We've just had the Women's World T20 final played in Melbourne with over 80,000 people there or something like that. There's incredible momentum at the moment in this country with women's cricket.
Yeah, I think firstly there's been a huge amount of the media agenda is very much about kind of presenting quite a doom-laden picture, I think, for women's sport, which is, you know, we're getting all these reruns of men's sport, all the imagery we're seeing, you know, is all around men's sport, and the plans are about men's sport. So the past is all about men's sport, and everything we're hearing about the return of sport is about men's team sports anyway. And that kind of, you know, is women's sport being abandoned? I personally feel really optimistic. I don't feel that from where I'm sitting, because, well, I think firstly, this is these are a set of challenges that all the kind of dual gender team sports are facing. So by that, I mean, you know, the high profile team sports of women's cricket, women's football, rugby, less so netball, obviously, because it's a women's only sport. But I think from where I sit and from my experiences on a daily basis, I know that if medically it can happen, and if India and South Africa can get on a plane this summer, then we will put on international women's cricket, and we'll do it to exactly the same standard, with exactly the same broadcast arrangements and behind closed doors, biosecure provisions that England men will perform within over the coming months. So I know that from an ECB board perspective and the appetite and the whole behind closed doors working group that exists within the ECB, if all of the conditions are okay, then we will put on international women's cricket. There won't be any financial kind of limitations on doing that, because you're right. We from the chairman down and the board, we believe in that momentum that we've seen. We believe that it had been created for a reason, and because there was an appetite for women's cricket, whether that's a live audience. You know, you talk about the 88,000 people at the MCG on International Women's Day this year for the India-Australia final of the Women's World T20 World Cup. Or you talk about viewing figures now on television, or the participation numbers, where, you know, our participation numbers are thriving, had been before the crisis. So I think if you believe in it, and I think I used the phrase earlier, kind of the sort of the leadership challenge here is going to be across sport, cricket being one of those sports, is remembering why we have had such momentum in recent years around women's sport. Why did we all believe in that? You know, why did we think that was, why did that matter? Why was having an inclusive sporting environment important for everybody? And I think if we, you know, I know the economics, this is an economic crisis and will become an economic crisis more and more, I'm sure, as the kind of the realities of everything sink in and so on. You know, cricket will lose between 100 million and 380 million is our best guess this year. So best case scenario, cricket will lose £100 million, and worst case scenario, if the whole international men's programme can't get fulfilled, then we'll lose somewhere around 380 million. And clearly that will have a huge impact for years to come on cricket at all levels. But personally, I'm optimistic that the ambition behind cricket becoming a more gender balanced sport that we laid out in our strategy at the start of the year, I believe that the game believes in that now more than ever. And so I actually think that out of the adversity of all of this, the opportunity for women's cricket particularly will hopefully still be a strong one.
Mm. How about badminton, Lauren? Because it seems to me to be quite an inclusive sport. You know, you have mixed doubles is played regularly and is not looked down upon, should we say, compared to other doubles. What's been done to promote gender equality in badminton, and what needs to be done?
I think you're right. Badminton is probably one of the better sports because there is mixed doubles. We physically play against one another, and actually, across the globe, there's quite a lot of sort of, I guess you would superstar role model type players of both genders. I do still think that sometimes you see a bit of unevenness between what's broadcast. So often a lot of the men's games are broadcast and fewer women's games. They'll just say that that's what makes people turn the TVs on. But with the prize money and that sort of thing, it's all equal. So we're very lucky from that sort of sense. But I do think that when I see juniors coming through, and I'm talking more about in England, just because that's my experience, there's more boys that make it through sort of the teenage years than there are girls. Whether that's to do with the sort of the desirability of it, just women in sport in general could play a part in that sort of thing. But I definitely feel like Badminton England are making an effort to put female role models out there. But I'd sometimes wonder whether we need to do it more obviously. It's trying to like put things out there and be balanced, but what's the matter with promoting girls in sport and saying that we're promoting them because they are girls in sport, if that makes sense. It doesn't have to be discreet and equal and simple. Let's just shout about how good the women are in badminton. That sounds really arrogant, but how good it is, how good our junior girls are and how many people are getting involved, and female coaches especially there's a real lack of compared to male coaches, and that means that less girls will come through because they've not got that sort of same gender role model as a coach. So I wouldn't really change anything so much at the top of the game. I'd probably change more in terms of getting the female coaches involved and being very vocal about that sort of teenage year of giving them role models and giving them girls to look up to and keeping them involved. I think is it's a really key stage for girls in any sport.
I'm interested about the whole idea of mixed sport. Actually, I wonder if you think that, because not all sports really, you'd say you could have mixed teams or mixed competition, but in a few you can. So do you think if more sports took up a mixed competition, do you think that might go a bit further towards gender equality?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes it's just viewed as a little bit of a joke for the mixed gender things, but I don't see why you can't have like exhibition things, especially in where it is mixed male and female. For cricket as an example, could you do like a mixed sort of team event as part of showcasing the talent that you have from the women's side and the men's side? And I just think, I remember speaking to some of the tennis players in Rio, and I hope there's no tennis fans here that I'm going to insult, but they also have doubles events. So they play the singles events, which is obviously their focus, but they play the doubles events. And at the start of the Olympics, they didn't know who was going to play doubles and they didn't know who was going to play with who. And they were quite open about the fact that the mixed and the doubles events, not the doubles so much, the mixed event for them especially was a little bit of a casual event. And for me, I would like to change that view, because yes, the men are usually more powerful and faster and physically different. But if you look on a women's court, it makes for a very good game, having that sort of tactical side of things where you've got a man possibly trying to pick on a woman and vice versa. And the game is very interesting from the point of view of manoeuvring more than it is, if you have men's doubles, it's very, very physical, hard and fast, and it's not so thought out. And so I think you're right, if we could get more events like that, you might be able to see what the women can really do against the men.
Cricket, I guess, is probably a bit more difficult to have a mixed side, but I know there are certainly mixed sides at amateur level. Claire, I wonder what you think.
Yeah, look, I think I actually would disagree a little with Lauren there around, I wouldn't want to make a concerted effort to try to mix elite cricket teams, because I think it's I think it perpetuates that comparison point, which is women aren't as quick, women don't bowl as fast, women don't hit the ball as fast. And actually what we're trying to get to is for a young girl to see a pathway that is very clear to her, you know, that where she can be identified as a talented young cricketer, and see a route through our pathway and our domestic game through to the England women's cricket team. Because I think it's the comparisons where women's sport suffers. And you don't get them. You probably don't get them in badminton. I don't know, Lauren, but you know, you certainly don't get them in. You don't get them in tennis. I don't think you do anyway. You don't get them in sports like in athletics or in rowing or cycling. But it's typically those dual gender team sports where people will use language which is really damaging, which is, you know, women's cricket, for example, isn't as good as men's cricket. And that comparison is completely unneeded and unhelpful, because they are separate sports with separate pathways, with separate pinnacle global events and World Cups and so on. And what we want is for girls to be able to see, which they haven't because of decades of, you know, underinvestment and essentially decades of discrimination. We now want girls to see that they've got an equal chance to play the game at the age of whatever. They've got an equal opportunity to pick up a bat and a ball, and then they've got an equal chance in terms of the support and infrastructure of playing at the highest level.
And I think it really depends on what sport you play, doesn't it? Because clearly
Definitely.
some sports are much easier to mix up than others.
And it's the traditionally male sports that are perceived as male team sports, where you wouldn't even want to try to mix those, I don't think, because there will be unfavourable comparisons as a result.
Yeah, I get that. We're going to move on to Black Lives Matter and you know what the impact of that on sport. Before we get there, Claire, there's a question for you, which is, will women's international cricket be on the BBC this summer?
I think the highlights will be. The live rights obviously will be with Sky, so they would cover any and all international cricket that we play live. I think actually we are due to have a live T20 for the first time, men's and women's T20, international T20 on the BBC. But again, I don't know where we've got to with those arrangements. But as I said earlier, if we play, if we can get on, then all of our live apart from that one-off T20 game, then everything live would be on Sky, and then highlights packages on BBC, and hopefully the one-off live T20, which would be great. I think just on the whole broadcast point, what's also going to be interesting as we recover from this or emerge from this, whenever that is the whole, and I don't know what Lauren would say about the commercial kind of investments into men's and women's badminton, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to the commercial landscape of sport, because, you know, it's a pretty much a given that brands are going to have less money as we all come out of this economically. And, you know, women's sport is cheaper. Women's sport is cheaper to sponsor. You get a lot more for a lot more bang for your buck if you're a brand or a commercial partner with $500,000 to invest. You know, that's going to go a lot further in women's sport. And so that could be another flip positive that might come out of this, is how and also brands wanting to be involved with, you know, organizations that have got that sort of social purpose. I think will probably be something that we'll start to see more of than perhaps before this situation, I hope, anyway.
Thoughts on that, Lauren? Commercially, how could it impact women's badminton?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not that involved with the ins and outs of the finances in badminton, but I do know that this has been a really difficult time for them, because we're not funded so much by UK Sport. We get some funding, but it's very limited. And so financially, we've had quite a tough time because we lost that funding after Rio, and it's taken a long time for them to get back on their feet. And what we said when we first lost that was that players like myself I'm 28 now, so I've been in the system for quite a long time. I'm not particularly the one that was going to suffer. The ones that are going to suffer were the juniors, the people coming through, because the amount that Badminton England can invest on external training centres and coaches and high performance training across the country was lowered. So opportunities that I may have had as a junior that are what got me to the point of professional badminton may not be available. And with people not being able to get onto badminton courts, dropping membership fees and all of the other financial aspects of Corona, I would worry again that might be the case, because being the sport that we are, it's still going to be quite a significant amount of time until people are back on badminton courts. I think they were talking about the beginning of November as a best case scenario for general public playing. So I think finance is quite a big worry from a badminton side of things.
Yeah, I think it will be for a number of sports, I guess, going forward. Let's move on to racial equality then. Obviously, that's really sort of taken over the news headlines over the last few days with the Black Lives Matter protests and all that's been going on with those. A lot of sports people have been involved as well. I saw Raheem Sterling was on Newsnight the other day. I can't remember the last time a footballer was on Newsnight to talk about a political issue. Claire, do you think it's time for sport to start playing a leading role in racial inequality and not just wait for the government or government policy?
Yeah, look, I think it's a vital role for sport to play, because sport does or has got the power. Power is a strong word, and sport has got the power to unite communities and bring people together and create that sort of level playing field for inclusion. So yeah, I 100% think that sport has a responsibility to play a lead role. I think, cricket has done a bit in this space. I don't think, we've been particularly amazing. A couple of years ago, we launched a good plan, a game-wide plan to engage better with our South Asian population, recognising the huge interest in cricket, but the fact that very few were engaging in kind of, I suppose, any ECB run activity or recreational clubs with the kind of the sort of the ECB badge over them. So I think I wasn't part of that working group, but I know it looked at the talent pathway, it looked at participation and coaching particularly, which would be a challenge across all sports, particularly football probably, and leadership, governance, and yeah, there's a huge amount of work for sport to do in this space, without doubt. Just a couple of hours ago, I got an email from our national talent manager who works for me, called Di Lewis, and she said we've got to do more. We've got to be more overt. There's this idea that being kind of silent is being complicit in not being, not taking a positive, proactive, affirmative stance. And so she's immediately wanting to talk more about what we can do with our pathway. And yeah, it's vital. Long answer. It's vital that sport plays a role in this, and whether that's in its own back gardens, as it were, or whether it unites, and comes together across sport for a more kind of collective impact. I don't know, but
does it need to start really from the top down, really, from the boardrooms really, and the coaches? I mean, I know in football, for example, they're something like 33% of are black and ethnic minority origin, and I don't think there's any BAME people on boards or anything like that. I think there's one black manager in the Premier League. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pipeline situation. It is about that. I don't know the reasons why. I don't know why in football there is such a poor transition rate from playing into positions of into coaching roles or managerial roles or boardroom roles or administrative roles. I don't know the answer to that, but clearly it's not good enough.
And in cricket, I guess it would be with Asians, wouldn't it? It would be the similar comparison, South Asians.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I suppose so. You know, we've got, well, certainly the men's team that won the World Cup last year was a very diverse group of men in terms of backgrounds and faiths. And yeah, similar situation in terms of coaching. I'm just thinking, you know, off the top of my head I mean, we apply the Rooney rule to our recruitment for men's and women's coaching positions and performance positions up and down our pathways. We apply that rule. We have done probably only for the last 18 to 24 months.
So does that mean there's more people now in positions of power at the ECB then from ethnic minority backgrounds because of the Rooney rule?
No, it probably hasn't resulted. It hasn't converted into that.
Right.
But it's meant that we've been much positive. We've taken more affirmative action in our recruitment and our shortlists for certain roles.
Okay.
It's a rule, Matt, that we haven't applied to administrative positions. We've applied to coaching and performance pathway positions.
Right. Okay. How about in badminton, Lauren? Does badminton need to become more multicultural?
Yeah, I think there's a huge sort of Asian contingent in badminton, you know, in China, Indonesia and India especially. It's one of the largest sports over there, you know, and a lot of participants, a lot of viewing, you know, quite a good financial side of things over there. But as far as, you know, BME goes, hugely underrepresented, you know, for a whole host of, a whole host of reasons, I imagine, not ones that I could probably get into. But, you know, there's not many players who I know of a top level who are black or mixed race. And that might be to do with where the sport is, you know, popular. Obviously, it's most popular in Asia and has a bit of popularity in Europe, in countries like England and Denmark, mainly. But then if I look across, you know, who I see playing and who I see coaching on sort of the more participation level, again, there's a lot of South Asians and that sort of thing playing over here and coaching here. But again, as far as black people go, definitely an underrepresentation. And yeah, I don't really know why that is. I would hope that Badminton England are trying to diversify, and I certainly notice quite a bit of diversity in the staff. If you look at the board, it's a very white board. It's a very elderly board. Don't tell them I said that though. But you know, there's not much diversity at the top, and it's definitely something that needs to be looked into, of why people of different ethnicities aren't looking to climb the ladder in badminton, and why they're not wanting higher positions, and you know, possibly why are they just looking to play on a social level and not beyond that. But it's definitely something that is lacking in the sport, and I would love to see badminton do something about it, because they have got a great voice in a lot of countries, so they could, you know, make a difference.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's just part of the amateur sport experience in this country, you know, playing, when I can speak about playing cricket as a youngster, and even now playing club cricket, you know, you come across so many different ethnicities in the changing rooms and on the opposition side that I really think it enriches the whole experience. And I think that's something that sport could really, again, it's another selling point of sport, really, that it, you know, it brings communities together. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does. And you know, different experiences where you play up and down the country, for sure. Whether you play cricket in rural Wiltshire, or whether you're playing cricket in, you know, in Bradford. So yeah, there would be a real mix of experience. I think for cricket, you know, one of the things we've talked about during this crisis is our purpose. And we launched a strategy just before, on February the 1st, I think it was, more or less, which is, is to run until the end of 2024. It's called Inspiring Generations, and its purpose is to connect communities and improve lives. So if this agenda and these ambitions and this sort of purpose isn't at the heart of that, then, kind of nothing is really. And that's something that certainly from a women's game perspective, we've talked about a lot. It's not, it's not about inspiring generations for white men and boys. It's not about connecting communities and improving lives for X, Y, and Z members of society. It's for everybody, and it's to inspire a generation to say cricket is a game for me. So everything about the kind of the bedrock of our strategy in terms of its beliefs and philosophy is about being inclusive and diverse. So we've set that as an organization, just a few months ago. So we've got to live by that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, Lauren, the same applies with badminton as with cricket. In the cricket side, you've seen that, in the 80s and 90s, you had a lot of Black Caribbean players came in and played for England, boosted the side, made them a better side. Now you have a lot more Asians coming through, Moeen Ali and Adil Rashid, just to name two, and there's a few more as well who've played for England over the last few years. So with badminton as well, if you could really tap into the sort of British Asian market more, that's surely going to strengthen the overall quality of the national side. And I think that would apply to a lot of different sports.
Yeah, definitely. I think sometimes having people, external players or athletes come in to a squad is sometimes viewed quite negatively. But actually, if you look at badminton as a top level, we have a very small group of top level players. So having more people coming in and enhancing the environment and, also showcasing that people of all ethnicities can play and should come and pick up a racket and get involved is definitely a great thing, and something that they should do more of. Because when you step on a badminton court, whether it's in a competitive tournament or if you've gone to your club and you're playing a match, you step on that court and you're all on an even playing field. It doesn't matter so much, your gender doesn't matter, your ethnicity doesn't matter, your financial situation in life doesn't matter. You're on a court and you both start at love all and you're playing to 21, and that's kind of it. And sport has that on a lot of levels for people. You can kind of forget about everything else apart from the game at the time, and that's the beauty of it, and that's the part that we need to harness to be inclusive.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a nice positive way, I think, to end this part of the chat. Chris, we're running out of time, aren't we? Do we need to stop and take some questions? Or can we keep going?
Yes, if people would like to pose some questions, please do. Just put your hand up and then I'll let you in. You can introduce yourself and your question. Okay,
we've got about 10 minutes to go. So Anyone got a question? Oh, there was one actually texted through to me. Hang on, let me see. Right, it's for Claire, isn't it? Oh, for both of you, actually. Transgender competition and where that might fit in with male and female teams. Quite a hot topic at the moment. I know in female cricket, there's a transgender player who plays for Kent. Is that right? Claire, what are your thoughts on that?
What's the actual question, Matt? What's the question?
I'm not too sure. It just says, someone's asked about transgender competition and where that might fit in with male. Well,
look, I mean, at the moment, our policy within the national governing body is very much a socially inclusive policy. It's not medically led, which it is at ICC, at the International Cricket Council, from an international perspective, which is much more in line with kind of IOC policy and regulations. So as you say, Maxine, who plays for Kent, is, I think, the only transgender player that we have playing at that level that we're aware of. And as you say, it's a really hot topic. At the moment, we reviewed about 6 months ago. I think it's something that we will be reviewed annually by our kind of regulatory committee. And at the moment, we are continuing to follow a socially inclusive policy rather than a scientific or medically led one.
How about badminton? Do they follow the science?
As far as I'm aware, on an international level, I don't know of any transgender athletes. So it's not something that I could really say much about. I'm not sure what the World Federation's actual written rules are on it. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer. I think on an international level and at top level, the difficulty is, like we said earlier, there's difference in strengths and things and physical differences in males to females. So to have transgenders competing against women, is it what you would call fair? I'm not entirely sure, because I don't think it's equal opponents. But I think if it is wanted to have a transgender inclusion at a top level, then I think we should have that category for that sort of event of playing, because then the medical side of things is more similar, and I do think that if you had a male who transitioned to female, they would very likely have a lot of advantages over a female player, and that may not be the most popular point of view, but I think it's something where I'd love people to be involved and able to play, of course, but I think there's difficulties with the strengths and weaknesses and the different physicalities of males and females.
Thanks, Matt. We have a question from Zena. Zena, could you unmute and ask your question?
Hi there, Zena from the Extinction Rebellion Cricket Club. Question for Claire. You mentioned the Connecting Communities Changing Lives initiative. Was that specifically for women's cricket, or was it for the wider communities? And how does the ECB plan on reaching communities? Is it through schools or sports clubs or cricket clubs? How do you plan on doing that?
Thanks, Ina. So the strapline or the mission statement of Connecting Communities and Improving Lives is the purpose essentially of our new strategy. So it's not just for women's cricket, is the first answer. So our new strategy is called Inspiring Generations 2020 to 2024, Connecting Communities and Improving Lives. And then within that strategy, which you can find on the website, are key pillars around what we will do to grow the game and make the game more relevant in that period of time. So transform women's and girls cricket is one of those pillars. There's another pillar about making cricket more accessible through the new 100 competition for men and women, the 100 ball competition, through a new digital and data strategy, a volunteering strategy, foundations and trusts, through our new schools strategy. Now, lots of this will probably have to be reshaped because of our finances. So the timing is interesting, given that we only launched it on the 1st of February. So yeah, it's a game-wide plan to grow the game, to make cricket more inclusive and more relevant for everybody. Also protecting our first-class county structure and our more traditional structures as well. But the challenge for us as a leadership team within cricket is working out financially how much of that are we going to be able to afford to still do, because it was quite a brave and quite an expensive growth strategy. So are we going to be able to, how much of it are we going to be able to do? Are we going to have some big bets and just massively cut it, for instance, and just do 3 or 4 of the big chunky items, including women's and girls cricket? Or are we going to try and do all of it, but to a much lesser degree, and kind of compromise on all of it? And so those are the live discussions we're in right at the moment.
Thanks, Claire.
Post-COVID world of finances is going to be interesting, that's for sure. We've had a good chat about the social side of things here. Let's finish off with an environmental question, because that's obviously a big part of sustainability as well. How can sport engage on climate change and ocean plastics and that sort of thing. Lauren, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to be more vocal about sort of environmental issues, and also been, before lockdown, I was doing like monthly sort of contact with all the staff at Badminton England, and trying to make a few changes in the offices there, because my belief with it is that once you have the knowledge about what your actions are doing and the environmental things that are going on, you're much more likely to make those positive changes. I think a lot of people are, ignorant's the wrong word, but unaware of the issues and unaware of their effects, and so don't make changes because of the inconvenience of those changes. And so I think, again, sport has the platform to use the role models in sport and use its huge sort of media outlet to spread the word about, here's some things that you should be doing and should be thinking about, and set an example as well. If government bodies start doing it, then clubs might also get involved. And for me, it's about spreading that knowledge and the word, and just setting a good example to people of how we can help the environment, whilst also still enjoying our sport.
Claire, I know that the ECB are quite environmentally conscious, and when I was at Sky, they did a Sky Ocean Rescue, which was a big plastics in the ocean initiative. What can you tell us about what cricket has been doing environmentally?
Well, it's good that you say that. That's your observation, Matt, that the ECB is good in this space. I think we've only just dipped our toe in the water, really. I think there's absolutely loads more that we can do as a game. And like Lauren said there, I think she's answered that brilliantly. It's the education piece, isn't it? I mean, I'm absolutely no expert, but we do have those those mass gatherings, don't we? Which they're now referring to, those big live sporting events, particularly cricket, where we use huge catering outlets, huge stadia. Our footprint, on those huge match days is significant. And I think some of those initiatives you refer to with the Sky, the ocean, the plastic initiative, that really did, like that. I think that was a really important catalyst. And I think there's a few county venues now. I think the Oval's one, which has really made massive and Lords, I think too, has made really big progress in their whole operation and putting on big events and single-use plastics and all of that. But I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, there is a long way to go on that. Start somewhere, I guess. Chris, we've reached the...
Yeah, I just actually on Claire's point, because it'd be useful. Russell used to be sustainability manager at Lords, so it might be worth just a quick word from you, Russ, about.
Go on, Russell.
Totally unprepared and ad-libbed. I was sustainability manager at Lords for 11 years up until last December. Worked there for a total of 20 years. So know the venue well, and things really changed in my time. Just a couple of examples. Lords, a number of venues also, but Lords is run on 100% wind-generated energy, so carbon footprint dropped by 82% just over the last couple of years. And in 2 years, we looked at our operations in terms of what we were giving out to our customers, and we took out 2 million pieces of plastic that we would have handed out in a year, is no longer handed out. There's still a lot of plastic, single-use plastics there, but 2 million pieces of plastic, and to me, I'm very proud of that. It's a huge figure, but the fact is we got to that point where we were handing out that much plastic, and that's every venue. It wasn't just Lords, it was the Oval, it was Edgbaston, but it was every cricket venue, every rugby venue, every football venue has been doing that. Every cinema, every theatre, every shopping centre, etc. is giving out this plastic, and it's just taking stock of where we are, drawing a line in the sand and saying there are other opportunities, there are other ways of doing it. So sport has a huge opportunity to influence, and if people come to their sports venues and see this, they'll take that away with them, and they'll go back to their own clubs, they'll go back to their own homes, and they'll want to reduce plastic. So that emotional contact that people have with sport is something that is incredibly powerful. And exactly what Lauren was saying, and you know, I really think the governing bodies and all the venues do need to be doing much more.
Thanks, Russ. Great answer, even though you were unprepared. Matt, yeah, we have come to the end. So if you just want to say the last couple of words, then I'll wrap it up officially.
Yeah, no, that's been fun, actually. I really enjoyed that. Good to see you again, Claire. It's been a while. Yeah, good to talk about various different things, and not easy subjects either, you know, stuff like talking about gender and racial inequality, you know, and transgender issues, environment, you know, they're not easy topics to talk about, so it's important that people have these kind of discussions, and that's the only way you move forward, really. So thanks very much, Claire, and thank you, Lauren, as well. I thought Lauren was really eloquent and really good on all of that.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot, yes, to all three of you. You've made it a really successful hour of really interesting discussion. I think we covered hopefully all the topics that we wanted to in that. So just to say a couple of things, the webinar next week is going to start a bit earlier as it's coming from Australia, and Claire might be interested in this one. It's the MCG are going to be talking to us about how they're coming out of lockdown. So it could be quite an interesting one. And please go on our website and register, because the more people who register, the more we're able to keep in contact with you. Okay, thank you all very much, and we'll see you hopefully next week. Thanks.